So Justin Trudeau says he's going to import 25,000 Syrian migrants by Christmas, which is just 7 weeks away. So put aside questions like where are they going to go? How will our social services handle them? How will they even get here? 100 practical logistical questions. Questions like how many Canadian homeless will be displaced by Syrian homeless? How many hospital beds will be cleared out for them? How will they learn the language? That kind of stuff. What I'm worried about today instead is how do you do background checks on 25,000 people coming from a terrorist wasteland in 7 weeks? Are you going to what? Just type their names into Google? What, in Arabic? See if they've been tweeting pro-jihad things? Check their LinkedIn page maybe? Ask for a resume? Seriously, how are you going to check to make sure they're not a security threat? Do you think they'll just tell you? It's not just terrorists on the Islamic State side. There are terrorist groups fighting against terrorist groups there. The terrorist group Hezbollah is fighting against the terrorist group, the Islamic State. And there's Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra and local militias and gangs. Do we take some people who were violent if they were violent against the Islamic State? I mean, let me give you an example. Here's a video of Syrian moderates fighting against the terrorist-supported Syrian government. Here they're putting women from the Alawite ethnic minority in a cage on top of a truck because that's the ethnic clan that Syrian dictator Bashar Assad is from. So they're putting these women in a cage as human shields. These are the moderates.
ايوه نحن بنتمنى انه هذا الشيء نحن ما بنريد هذا الشيء نحن بنطلب من النظام انه يوقف هذا الشيء لانه نحن بالنهايه اهل نحن ما ذنبنا شيء.
So like I say, how do we know if the Syrian migrants that Trudeau is rushing to bring to Canada are terrorists or not? 7 weeks, 25,000 people, but there's no way we'll be even set up for weeks. And set up where? Where will Canadians take these migrants from? Maybe a refugee camp in Jordan or Turkey. So let's say that by December 1st, we're ready in some refugee camp with an immigration office. How are they going to process 1,000 people a day, 7 days a week? That's really what it'll take, 1,000 a day. So what would that be like? How many Arabic-speaking immigration staff does Canada have? Or will we contract the security out? To whom? 1,000 a day. Many of them will have no paperwork or will say they don't. So what do? Just have a chat with them through a translator? What are we going to ask? If they've ever been a terrorist? Will they give us a pinky swear? Will those interviews be done if they're wearing a niqab? I'm not joking. The Liberals are the party that doesn't even want people to take a niqab off to vote, that doesn't even believe in picture ID for voting. Do you feel confident the Liberals are going to screen these 25,000 migrants, 1,000 a day, in a foreign language with no paperwork? You're feeling confident, eh? And I'm not just talking about people who've actually committed violence. I'm talking about people who believe in violence as a philosophy or as their religion. Syria is one of the most backward countries in the world, full of hate and sectarianism and bigotry. I mean, just for example, for liberals, if gay rights is your thing, you're pretty much importing 25,000 homophobes. The Pew Research Center didn't survey Syria directly, but it surveyed Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, the Palestinian territories, pretty much a circle around Syria and where all these Syrian refugees have fled to. And Pew asked them this question: should society accept homosexuality? In Jordan, 97% said no. Now, I don't necessarily think we should keep people out of Canada because they're homophobes. That's not my point. My point is, we're bringing in 25,000 people from one of the most bigoted, backward parts of the world. I'm just using gay rights as one example because these are literally the most homophobic people in the world. Oh, and they're not like church ladies about it. This is honor killing central. I mean, Syria is a country that was clocking 200 honor killings a year before the Civil War, which has surely skyrocketed as Muslim men kill any sisters or daughters or wives who have been raped in the course of war. So do you see where I'm going here? It's not enough to screen out people who have actually been part of a terrorist group or a militia or a gang, which is going to be a massive percentage of the population. I mean, it's a civil war over there. But what about screening out people who have not actually fired a gun or planted a bomb, and not even people who support murder, but people who in their regular lives hate the West, hate women, hate minorities, hate gays, hate Jews, hate liberal democracy, because that's who we're about to scoop up. I mean, these refugee camps themselves are a swamp of violence. Well, you think they're full of little lambs? There are wolves in there too, still devouring lambs. I mean, when you dump thousands of sexually repressed Islamist men into the West, men who believe the Sharia law philosophy that Muslims are superior to infidels, and that women who aren't covered up are just infidel whores who can be raped. Well, don't be surprised when there's an epidemic of rapes. which there has been in migrant facilities in the West. I'm not talking about even in Syria anymore. I'm saying that the migrant men have caused a rape epidemic in Europe. That's what happens when you let wolves in with the lambs. Or what about wolves fighting wolves? Countless examples, but here's a video from one migrant camp of Syrians fighting Afghans. What, you think they all love each other? Take a look. But let me be scientific, not anecdotal. Let's use a poll. Let's survey actual Syrian refugees, and such a survey exists. And it was done by the Arab Center for Research and Public Policy Studies, headquarters in Doha, Qatar. Last year they did an opinion poll of different Arabs around the Middle East, in Egypt, Tunisia, Lebanon, etc. They surveyed 600 people per country, but then they also did a special survey of Syrian refugees, 900 of them, in Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan. I think that's fascinating. I've never seen a poll of Syrian refugees before, have you? Well, let me show you the bundle of joy that we are about to import by Christmas. There's a lot of fascinating information about how the different Arab countries support terrorism. I'm not going to get into that now. Let's focus on our new house guests, Syrian migrants. According to this scientific survey, margin of error 4%, 19 times out of 20, literally 31% of Syrian refugees don't want the Islamic State terrorist group to be defeated. This is not the question, do you oppose the US-led combat mission? That's a different question, and 37% of Syrian refugees are opposed to any US-led combat. But maybe they just hate America or just hate war. The question I'm focusing on is whether or not they want the Islamic State defeated, and 31% of Syrian refugees say no. So are we going to screen for that? Are we going to ask our new Syrian lottery winners, getting a free trip to Canada, free healthcare, free schools, free welfare, free everything, are we going to ask them if they oppose defeating the Islamic State, they support the Islamic State? Because this poll suggests that out of 25,000 refugees, about 7,500 of them are going to be ISIS lovers. Oh, do you think I'm cherry-picking the data? Well, let me show you some more. Here's a good question. What are the greatest security threats to the security and stability of the Arab region? That was a question put to these Syrian refugees. They had a list of choices. Absence of democracy, that's a good one. The weakness of the state, economic difficulties, Islamist militancy, and then they listed countries. Iran, which is colonizing Syria. They listed the US and Israel too, because these are Arabs who are taught from childhood to hate the great Satan and the little Satan. So what did our beloved Syrian refugees say? Again, it's fascinating to see what other countries said, but that's a story for another day. Today, we're talking about the 25,000 people Justin Trudeau wants to bring in by Christmas. So what did the 900 Syrian refugees surveyed tell a fellow Arab pollster? Well, only 6% of these Syrians said that an absence of democracy was one of the top two problems. Can you believe it? Only 10% said radical Islam. Groups like Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, the Islamic State, only 10% chose them. 29% said Iran, which might be right. But 41% said Israel or the United States. Seriously, 19% said America was the top threat, and 22% of Syrians sitting in a refugee camp because the Islamic State was fighting with the Syrian dictatorship, but they blame the Jews. Stop and think about how screwed up you've got to be, how brainwashed, how poisoned from the time you were a baby. I mean, your home was bombed by the Muslim dictator of Syria, or maybe it was bombed by the Muslim dictator of the Islamic State terrorist group, or maybe it was bombed by the Muslim dictator of Iran, or bombed by some other tyrant, and you blame Israel, you blame the Jews. 22% of these Syrian refugees blame the Jews. Another 19% blame the US. Do you doubt they'd answer the same for Canadians? You see my point here? We don't even know how to screen out actual terrorists. But I'm not even the most worried about terrorists. I'm worried about the 41% of Syrians who are Jew-hating, American-hating bigots. I'm worried about the 97% who are gay-hating, probably women-hating bigots who come from a culture of violence against women. How do you screen them out? If you're Justin Trudeau, you don't. Because you don't care, as long as they vote Liberal in 2019. For the Rebel.Media, I'm Ezra Levant.
you.